welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about 10 different phrases and 10 different things we might say that might be pointing toward us heading for burnout. So we talk a lot about signs and symptoms. You've probably even read some blogs, seen some content online about what are some of the signs that you should look for. I actually think one of the best signs that we can look for is some of the things that we say about our day-to-day activities. So let's talk about what some of those things are and what some of those different phrases might mean. Now you're going to notice a very common theme today. Really, that theme is pay attention to the words that you're saying, because a good majority of the time they're not flippant. I actually find that we are pretty honest with the words we use to describe our life. We might be saying them kind of in a joking manner, but there's probably an element of truth to them. And the first phrase that we're going to talk about is exactly like that. The first phrase is, I'm up to my eyeballs, or some derivative of that. And I think that is a great descriptor of experiencing burnout, because when you are in or on the path to overwhelm, which is a form of burnout, then that often feels like you're drowning. You know, I will use the phrase when I'm talking about overwhelm burnout that it feels like you are drowning in tasks and responsibilities. That is basically what we're talking about when we're talking about the phrase, I'm up to my eyeballs. You are drowning in things to do. And obviously, we need to, in a situation like that, take a good solid look at our workload and really assess our priorities and the things that we have on our plate. Now, that's obviously easier said than done, but the important point here is to pay attention to the language you're using and make sure you're not ignoring it. The next phrase that we often use is, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm wiped out, some derivative of that phrase that is pointing toward exhaustion. Now, if you have a day or a week where you are feeling particularly exhausted, I would not say that that in and of itself is cause for alarm or means that you're about to burn out. With a lot of these things, what it is about is how frequently you say it. And if you are constantly feeling that depth of exhaustion, or you are constantly feeling like you are, you don't have enough energy to get through your day, that is more concerning. With a lot of this stuff, when it comes to burnout versus stress is very acute. You have kind of an end point for when the stress is going to subside. But when it's burnout, it's more of a lifestyle. And that's really the difference that we're looking for. So obviously, this one is about exhaustion. It is about a depth of tiredness. And obviously, if you can, taking time off to make sure you rest and recharge is a great way to handle and overcome that feeling of exhaustion. But sometimes that isn't possible. And frankly, sometimes it is not a fix. I will often say to clients, you can't fix burnout by taking a weekend off. You can't fix burnout with a vacation. Burnout is habitual. So what we can do to fix burnout is to make sure that we are building more actively and more consistently into our life self-care that is rejuvenating, especially if you've been pushing yourself too hard. So that is our second phrase. I'm exhausted/tired/wiped. The next phrase that I hear a lot, so much so that it's also become something that I've incorporated into talks and work that I've done with clients, is I feel like I can't turn off. If you feel like you can't turn off, this is a very, very important sign of overwhelm burnout. Not only is our world just constantly plugged in, constantly demanding things of us, but sometimes we, even if, we don't have emails to check or meetings to attend, sometimes we just have so many ideas and things floating around in our head that can lead to a sense of overwhelm. That can feel like we can't turn off, because everything that we're thinking seems like it is super important and potentially impactful to our professional or our personal lives. One way in which you can fix this is with boundaries to create better separation between your work and your personal life. I don't necessarily know that that's always a fix, because sometimes that overwhelm and that feeling of I can't turn off is related to personal responsibilities and commitments. What I really feel like is the biggest fix here is finding systems and means for wrangling the chaos. The reason why you might feel this way is because of the fact that you just have so much stuff floating around in your brain that you're finding yourself have to remember. This is where having great systems like my Notion Ultimate Digital Planner, subtle plug, can be very, very beneficial and very, very helpful. So make sure you've got systems where you can put all that information that's bouncing around in your head so that when your head hits the pillow at the end of the night, you can actually fall asleep. The next phrase I want to cover is actually two different phrases that I'm going to kind of lump together because I feel like they both have the same potential consequence. The first is I have to do everything myself. And the second is that no one pulls their own weight. Now, These phrases aren't necessarily indicative of burnout in and of themselves, but what they are indicative of is that this is somebody who is struggling to release control. Feeling like you need to be the person that does everything, being the person who really struggles to delegate, can eventually lead to exhaustion, fatigue, and ultimately burnout. Because the fact of the matter is you are doing stuff that you probably shouldn't be doing and that you should be delegating to others. But because you struggle to release control, you are not able to let other people do these things. And frankly, piling all of this stuff on your plate is only ever going to potentially lead you to burnout. Now, here's where I want to talk about these two phrases a little bit separately. I have to do everything myself points toward, like we already mentioned, a feeling like you can't release control. And usually where that comes from is the fact that you don't trust other people to get the job done. I have heard lawyers in particular use this phrase, and in one particular context, we were talking about, well, I have a paralegal that could help with that, and I asked, why don't you have the paralegal do it? And they came up with all of these excuses for why they didn't know how to do it and why it was going to cost them so much time and energy. And here's kind of my opinion on that. There is so much stuff professionally that people can only learn how to do if we let them do it. They might make mistakes, absolutely, but that's also why you're here to check their work after it's been done. So that first one really comes from a place of struggling to delegate because you're just afraid of relinquishing control. And the only way people are ever going to be able to start to get stuff done the way you want them to is for you to let them do those things. Now, the other one that we talked about, no one pulls their own weight. This is a textbook situation where somebody might ultimately breed resentment for the people that they work with. And in thinking about this one, the first time I was kind of recording a podcast on this, the thought I had is, are people not pulling their own weight because they're lazy? Or is it because they haven't been given the opportunity to contribute? Or, the third or, because they don't know that they're needed? Like, seriously, consider this a gut check moment. Are people truly not pulling their own weight, or are they not being given the opportunity to help you? Are you even actually asking for help, or are you assuming people are going to read the situation, understand that you need help, and come to the rescue? Some of us are very, very off-putting when it comes to receiving support. Maybe we don't ask. Maybe we get frustrated with people when they don't do it the right way. You know, all sorts of circumstances can arise here that can frankly deter people from supporting us in the ways that we might need. And I think that's an important thing for us to consider. I will be the first to admit that I am admittedly and absolutely a recovering control freak. And I think that's an important thing for us to acknowledge in ourselves. Oftentimes, the overwhelm and all of the things that are on our plate are either A, self-induced, or B, the result of us just not asking for help. While it is absolutely frustrating when you have lazy coworkers who just really will not pull their own weight, what we can always do is to communicate and set proper expectations with people and, ask for help when we actually need it. The next phrase is a super, super important one, and that is, no one understands how hard I work. Now, this might seem like a phrase that shouldn't be included in this list, but not feeling appreciated and not feeling supported in your work environment is one of the top reasons why people experience burnout, particularly in corporate and organizational settings. It is important for us to feel valued. It is important for us to feel appreciated. And when we don't, it is one of the top contributors to emotional exhaustion, which is one of the primary characteristics of burnout. Now, this is the moment where I actually want to give leaders and managers a little bit of credit. Because frankly, sometimes our leaders are too distracted by the troublemakers, the bad apples, or frankly, the people who are struggling and just needs more support. And that's the reason why they're not giving us the recognition that we feel we are owed and that we feel like we deserve. As a former manager, I can attest to the fact that I did not show appreciation, acknowledgement, recognition to the high performers on my team because my mind and my day-to-day tasks were so monopolized by the people that were struggling. That absolutely is a problem. It was a problem for me in my management situation, and I'm sure it's a problem for a lot of leaders. but they also probably know it's a problem and it's something that they probably want to work on. So the last thing I will say here is there are absolutely polite ways to bring this up with your manager or your superior or a leader in your organizational context. And I would say it's a very important thing for us to do because it helps us avoid the resentment that is ultimately going to burn that bridge and lead you to potentially leave that position. So if this is something you are dealing with, what I would definitely say is express that to your manager. Again, there are ways to do it in a polite, respectful way, because they probably completely understand that they're not giving you the acknowledgement you deserve. Another important phrase when it comes to burnout is, I just don't care anymore. When you are a high achiever or a high performer, these people are usually highly engaged, highly motivated, and very, very self-sufficient. So when they get to the point where they start feeling apathetic, negative, pessimistic about the work that they are doing, that is a massive sign of emotional burnout and emotional exhaustion. And is a significant red flag that I am looking for with clients and with organizations or groups that I'm speaking to. And really, the only way we can overcome this is by taking some time off or just taking some dedicated time to reconnect with and start to really understand your values and your passions and almost recalibrating why you're doing the work that you're doing. Now for this next one, I'm switching angles here a little bit because there's actually a quote that's associated with this one that I really, really want to make sure I read. The phrase in question that we're talking about here is, I feel like I haven't accomplished anything. This is a really, really important thing to look out for when it comes to preventing burnout, because feeling unproductive despite working really, really hard is an absolute sign of overwhelm, burnout. Really, when you get into the state, you can feel like you're running on a hamster wheel and not making any particular progress. And that is something we absolutely want to look out for. I'm going to quote Mark Murphy, who wrote a Forbes article about this, because I absolutely love this quote. He says, when our emotional reserves are high and we're achieving big goals left and right, we're highly unlikely to grumble about our lack of productivity. But when we're burned out, it's easy to have days where we feel as though we're running through quicksand. No matter how many hours we've logged, a feeling of accomplishment eludes us. Once again, this disconnection, this feeling like we're not making any progress is absolutely a potential sign not only for emotional burnout, but also for overwhelm burnout as well. And it's definitely one to look out for. The next phrase I want to touch on is the phrase, I can't get anything done because of X. This is another one of those where feeling like external factors are preventing you from getting things done isn't in and of itself a potential sign for burnout, but feeling a lack of control can ultimately lead to burnout, which is the issue here. And I am not going to come at this one by saying the fix is about taking responsibility, because let's be honest, there are sometimes things that we don't have control over that prevent us from being able to get things done. But what can be very, very helpful is taking a moment to really ask yourself, am I really not able to get anything done? Or is there something I can do in the meantime? Sometimes we feel more stuck than we actually are. Simultaneously, there is a question we can ask of, how can I regain control? Is there something I can do to help me regain control in this situation? Sometimes what this is about is just taking a moment to call out whether what you're actually feeling is true, or just taking a moment to brainstorm and find ways to move forward in spite of the stuckness that we might feel. Sometimes that is all we need. Momentum is very, very motivating. So I always recommend looking for something that you can do. And that might mean pivoting your focus for the moment. So if that is the thing that helps you get unstuck, that is the thing I would encourage you to do in this context. I had to switch up locations for our final tip because I was losing my lighting. But hey, this is kind of an unofficial tour of my studio in a sense. Our final phrases are kind of two phrases that are very, very similar. This is impossible, or I'll never finish. Now, both of these phrases are what we call absolutes. And this one's for my Star Wars fans. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. I was actually talking to a student about that earlier, and we were laughing about the fact that he literally used an absolute only in saying that statement. So sorry, Obi-Wan, you kind of contradicted yourself. But anywho, why are these two phrases problematic from an overwhelm or burnout perspective? Ultimately, the issue in this situation is the fact that you can't see a clear path forward, and therefore you feel stuck. And again, that stuckness is an indication of potential overwhelm burnout that might be happening. Now, I love the quote and the notion that overwhelm often isn't having too much to do. It's not knowing where to start. That is often where the feeling of overwhelm for a lot of the clients I work with and a lot of what I see comes from. So to escape this feeling, what we can do is we can basically help give ourselves that clear path forward. And one of my favorite ways to do this, which is something I actually did with a client like 10 days ago, is to literally have you brain dump everything that is discouraging you, everything that feels like a weight on your shoulders, everything that feels like you will never finish or that's impossible for you to finish. Write all of that stuff down on a piece of paper. And then I want you to very, very deliberately and very, very intentionally and almost ruthlessly go through that list and say, okay, which of these things legitimately has to be completed? Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Has to get done today, this week, this month. Now, for a lot of us, what ends up happening is we realize that there's actually not a lot of stuff on our to-do list that 1,000% has to get done. There's a lot of stuff that we want to get done that would be nice for us to get done. But when we really, really get down to the nitty gritty, what literally things will fall apart if this doesn't get completed, like what has to get done or the world will end, there's very, very few things that fall into that category. Now, maybe you are somebody who does have a lot of stuff that absolutely has to get done. Okay, the same exercise, maybe it won't reveal to you what is truly a priority and what isn't, but what it's gonna do is it's gonna help you make a hierarchy out of your list so that you know exactly what needs to get done. Again, momentum is motivating. You just need to know what that first thing is. What's that roadblock that's keeping you from moving forward to get the momentum going, to get that snowball rolling down the hill. And as soon as you do, then we're off to the races. That was all sorts of analogies to wrap that up there. But with that, those are 10 phrases that we've got to kind of be on the lookout for that are potentially indicative and might indicate that you are heading toward burnout. So look out for those phrases and apply some of the tips that I mentioned as we went through here. Now, if you feel like I missed any phrases or there are things that you say and you're kind of wondering what that might be indicative of or how you can overcome that, drop a comment below. If you're liking this kind of content, I kind of tend to alternate between doing some burnout and stress related content and some Notion related content. If you like this stuff, don't forget to give this a like, thumbs up, drop a comment below, subscribe. It is all stuff that helps the algorithm find this. And I've been told by several people on YouTube that they like my content, but it's hard to find because the algorithm doesn't find it. So if you feel like this is more stuff that you want to see, that you want other people to see because you know they need it, don't forget to do that, to like, subscribe, drop a comment. It's very, very helpful. But once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. Y'all are my people. I've been loving being on YouTube. And with that, I will talk to you next time. Bye.